All right, welcome to All right, guys, I see a few people joining us. Welcome. Welcome, Stacy. Welcome, Tessa. There's a Padlet in the chat. If you're tech savvy, you can also scan the QR code there. Just to share sort of what are you proudest of so far in the work you've done to accelerate learning. Feel free to shout out your colleagues by name, especially if they're on this call and you just want to send them some positive energy. Or think about a win from this week. It's Thursday. What's one win you've had thus far that's sort of pulling you through the week? So go ahead and click on that Padlet. Welcome, welcome. Seeing some faces. Hi, Lisa.
Hello.
Good to see you again.
You as well.
For those of you just joining, I'm putting in the chat the Padlet link so you can share something you're proud of around this learning acceleration work or a win from this week. Welcome, welcome. Seeing a few people join. Go ahead and click on the Padlet link in the chat to get that Do Now started. In the Padlet, I see people talking about sort of summer task force and getting some of that work for the summer started now. Way to plan ahead there. That's definitely a huge win. The team defining what acceleration means, getting a clear working definition for the team to move forward in that work. Critical first step, really big win. And on the Padlet, you can interact by liking other people's posts. So if you've already participated, shared your own thought, go ahead and give someone else a thumbs up so they know you're proud of that work too, or you want to celebrate that. Four folks have liked finally getting a decent number of students in person and using turn and talks again. Students talking and creating the oh moments in the classroom got me excited. I wonder if the person who shared that wants to come off mute, tell us a little bit more about it. You've got 6 likes so far. I'd love to hear a little bit about that highlight.
So this is Matt Collins who did that. today in our honors pre-algebra class, some of my 7th graders who were talking about just solving problems and finding errors in problems. I had them turn and talk to each other to do it. And one of my students literally said, "Oh," and it was the best sound I've heard all year. And so it's like, as teachers, we live for that, or I do at least. And so getting that finds like, this is what it's all about. So it gets us back into some sense of normalcy.
Great. Awesome. We'll give it about 60 more seconds. I will put in the chat one more time the Padlet in case you just joined and you want to see your colleagues' reflections.
Ooh, Hamlet. I loved teaching Hamlet. Oh, that's so cool.
All right, the next thing in the chat is the handout for today. It should force you to open a Google Doc that you should be able to edit. You don't need that urgently, but I wanted to give you time to get set up as we get started. Again, this is our TNTP team with you for the next few weeks around this accelerated learning work. We're excited to be with you again and to support you along this journey at whatever step in the journey you and your team may be in. I'm Elizabeth Lamont Mitchell, for those of you that haven't been with us in the past sessions. I have been leading this acceleration work here in New Orleans for the last year and working with a network of schools here to sort of action plan and roll out this process in New Orleans. Shireen, I'll turn it over to you for an introduction.
Sure. So I am in Dallas, Texas, and I have been I've worked with a couple other clients on acceleration work, and I'm really happy to hear teachers are joining us more so today. Great.
And Chris, I'll have you jump.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Thanks, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Henderson. I've been working with the department on a number of different projects over the past year. I've been doing learning acceleration work with districts and states all across the country, particularly in the Midwest. So very excited to be with you all tonight. Thank you for joining. Those of you who have been in the previous sessions, welcome back. Those of you who are new today, we're really happy to have you here. And looking forward to today's topic, and just thank you for your time. We know this is a busy time of year. We also know all of you are in different places, so thank you for that. And Elizabeth, I think Corey Appler, our main partner over at the department, is also with us today. So Corey, I don't know if you want to jump in. Corey's been the architect behind the department's framework for renewal, school renewal and acceleration. So Corey, didn't know if you want to introduce yourself.
No, I just wanted to say hello and welcome to everybody. I do just want to also remind you that if you've missed a session or you weren't able to get your full team to a session, we are posting them on the Launch Nebraska website. I'll go ahead and put that link in the chat. We have the archive, the slides, and the handouts up there as well. So session 1 is ready, finalizing to get the video up from session 2. So we're just wanting to make those available to you all. So again, if you need anything, let us know. I know some of our content specialists are on, Marissa, Deb, Abby, and others may also be joining. So just happy to be a part and thankful for the partnership with TNTP.
Thanks, Corey. A few just reminders in terms of our time together. This is quite a long session, so there will be breaks built in. Feel free to take, bio breaks, quick breaks for yourself as you need. We want to be able to cover as much as we can, but we recognize it's the end of a long day. And so we want to build in those breaks for you. in the way that feels comfortable. It is helpful if your camera's on, especially for the breakout room times where you're able to have discussions with colleagues and work together and collaborate. So if you can be on video, turn on your camera, that's best. And then let's really try to take in this moment, put away the email or the distractions that might be coming so we can focus here today. And then we are, here's where we are in terms of the series. So we are at session 3, Essential Skills and Knowledge for ELA and Math. We have covered sort of the intro to accelerated learning and thinking about diagnostic assessments. And we got some, ending feedback at the last session, and I wanted to talk a little bit about how we're approaching this. So on this call, like Shireen mentioned, we have, some teacher leaders, school-based teams, also district level teams, curriculum directors, teaching and leading directors, and ESUs that may manage different teams around the state. We want you to be able to engage in this material from whatever lens you're approaching it from. I'll do my best to give different options for breakout room time, where some of you on the curriculum side may approach it from a curriculum lens, and some of you in different leadership positions may approach it from a leadership, accountability, manager perspective. So throughout the session, we'll really gear it to as wide of an audience as we can. And then I'll ask you just to engage in the work in the best way you can. We will go through the process from a curriculum lens and from an instructional lens, and then you'll be able to take that further and think about how that impacts your role and your work at whatever position you're in. So that will be our focus today. Moving forward, we'll get into scope and sequences, and then ensuring students have access to strong instructional materials. And then we'll wrap up looking at professional learning and strong systems, how to put those strong systems in place. So our goal today is going to be sort of deceptively simple. Today, we're going to identify the most essential prerequisite skills and knowledge in at least one grade level for English language arts and for mathematics. This is going to seem easy when we say it here, but there definitely is a lot of work, thinking, and processes that will go into play here. And you'll use this work to make decisions and choices about the diagnostics you'll use for the remainder of this year and as you launch into next year. And as you're adapting your scope and sequence or adapting unit plans for the remainder of the year, this information will be critical to that work. Teachers also will use this to sort of determine where those students need extra support as they launch into their next unit or next year of instruction. So our focus today are these top 2 pieces: identifying the essential content and then identifying prerequisite knowledge, skills, and academic vocabulary that students will need in English language arts. I want us to remember sort of our values and guiding principles that will drive how we make this plan here. We looked at these in our first session, and we're looking at them again today. And we took a poll to talk about sort of where we were the most focused. And overwhelmingly, we were focused on making sure grade level content is our priority here, while also addressing the inequities head on, assuming the best and supporting all of our stakeholders and communicating clearly. Take a second here and think about today, which value or guiding principle are you sort of going to ground your work in today? Take a second and throw it in the chat. Let's see where we're falling today. It's almost unanimous so far. We're focused on grade level content here. Throughout this work, we will also think about ways to make communication a priority and also addressing inequities head on, making sure that every student in our state, in the state of Nebraska, has access to grade level content is addressing inequities. So choosing to use those high quality instructional materials will help us address inequities head on. So these two can go hand in hand. Great. And you've seen this slide before, but it's vital to our work. And just like in the Padlet, one of you mentioned that your team now has a working definition of accelerated learning. We want to make sure each session we are clarifying what we mean by accelerated learning. Can I have a volunteer come off mute and read for us what accelerated learning is?
Accelerated learning strategically prepares students for success in current grade level content. Acceleration ready students for new learning. Past concepts and skills are addressed, but always in the purposeful context of current learning.
Great, great. And the differences here between remediation, how does this view of accelerated learning differ from our past views on remediation and our old focus? Who can answer that for me?
I would say that remediation focuses on those skills in isolation, whereas the accelerated learning is always really intentionally embedding those into the current grade level instead of teaching them in isolation.
Mm-hmm. So accelerated learning allows us to use the context of the unit, to use the content knowledge that students are gaining, and to support them through that grade level process. What's another drawback of remediation that we've talked about in our past sessions? Or another clear difference between accelerated learning and remediation?
With remediation, students are unlikely to get caught up to grade level content because the focus is on past material instead of current.
Exactly. I'm snapping it up for you. We snap here. But I think you're exactly right. Students can get caught in this vicious cycle of remediation where they are pulled out of grade level content for these remedial skills in isolation, like Marnie said, and separate from the grade level content. And that creates a cycle where they're constantly behind and they're not given access, equitable access. So accelerated learning allows us to support all students by providing just-in-time supports, by doing the scaffolding and supporting the unfinished learning that exists, while also giving students access to grade level content and rigorous curriculum materials. So how do we take action on our first step here, which is determining the essential content in English language arts? We know that there are 4 essential best practices in literacy instruction. We won't dig into them in detail in this session, but we will talk through them quickly just to ground ourselves in this work. We know in early grades, students need systematic practice and systematic skills with reading foundational skills. Once students have learned to read, they need to read to learn by being exposed to complex texts that build knowledge and vocabulary, and they need to write and discuss in response to those texts. So these are our 4 main focuses here in literacy instruction. Everything we do today will be grounded in one of these four. We'll also make use of sort of the essential content for 2020, 2021 documents that Nebraska has released. It sort of became clear that we need an even more focused way to approach teaching this year and possibly next. And so student achievement partners nationally and Nebraska at the state level have spent time creating these great documents that are strategic and have done a lot of work for you around naming essential content and helping you determine what is critical knowledge for students. We're going to spend some time in these documents today. I've linked them in the handout, so I'll put the handout in the chat one more time so you can make a copy. You probably have this sort of bookmarked on your computer already, this page on the Nebraska State Department site. But if not, go ahead and click into it. And you're going to want to open the essential instructional content for 2020-21 for ELA and literacy. And we're going to spend some time in the document itself at the beginning of our session today. I'll give you about 45 seconds to get there. If you're into paper like me, you may have already printed it out, have it in a binder in your office. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. And I want you to either read or reread skim the introduction section, which is pages 6 through 9. And I want you to jot down any questions you have about the purpose of the document or any reflections you have about this introduction here. So 5 minutes reading the introduction, 6 through 9. Looking for the purpose of the document and any questions you might have.
Do you want me to send everybody off? Oh. Lori, you should be able to open the link. If you can't though, I can help you.
Shireen, I'm going to give people just 5 minutes of independent time before we go off into breakout rooms, so everyone can really like read, internalize themselves, get questions, jot those down in the margins. Okay, let me see if I can. It feels like people are having a little bit of trouble here, so let me add some clarity. When you open the Word document, it should open as an editable Word document for you or Google Doc. It's a Google document. You have to make a copy to open it. And then on page 2, there's a link, but I can put it in directly in the chat in case you're having trouble with the Google Doc. Yes, it's the third link in the document. It's in the chat now directly too, if that's easier for folks to find. Chat Shireen directly if you're still having issues, and I'm going to set the timer now for 5 minutes so folks can dive in.
Into the chat. All right. Serious. What is it? No, I just it's frustrating because language works.
All right, if you're reading, keep reading. I am going to present my screen and sort of walk through the process. I think this might help a few people that are struggling to find the information. All right, so if you are here, you clicked on the link, you're gonna actually click on this document that says Essential Instructional Content for the 2020-2021 school year, and it'll download something for you. So it's gonna download it to your computer. When you open that, you'll see a document that looks like this. Nebraska Department of Education, Essential Instructional Content for the 2020-2021 school year. And you're gonna scroll to page 6. And this has the introduction to what this document's about. And the introduction is about 3 pages long, 6, 7, 8, and a little bit of 9. In one of the groups, Deanna was sharing really, I think a key question and thought looking at this introduction. I'd love for her to share and then open up the floor for others that maybe want to answer her question or add on to it a little bit so we can see where we're at. Go ahead, Deanna.
So just a shout out to Melissa Schroeder and my group and colleague that started the conversation with the focus on the introduction and how it really is sounded in strong tier 1 on grade level instruction. But that how do we go forward with our work grounded in tier 1 instruction when the majority, 80% or greater of our students are not in that tier 1 band of readiness, and how do we help our teachers take all of those students, even if we have tier 1 quality instruction materials that allow for scaffolds, how do we stay focused on that tier 1 when we're scaffolding everybody at this possible tier 2, but do tier 2 your entire class? So that's where our conversation kind of surrounded.
Thanks for sharing. Anyone agree, want to add on to Deanna, or have an answer, something you'd like to reply?
I've always called it my 80-20 philosophy. Like if you have 80% of your students somewhere, you can bring the other 20 to you, but it's a challenge when your 80% is below. You don't want to bring the 20% that's above down to where the 80% is. So it's my 80-20 challenge.
Thoughts from the group? Stephanie agrees in the chat. I see some agreement there. I think this was great to pull out of the intro, as our focus is on grade level content. I know many of you in Nebraska have done some work with the opportunity myth that TNTP has done. I see some nodding right now from Lisa and others. And I think I would hearken back to that in terms of thinking about our mindset here and where we want to be. The work TNTP did there looked at classrooms classrooms all over the nation, and sort of, did they offer students grade level work? Were they putting grade level content in front of kids? And then what were kids able to achieve? And they found that in a majority of classrooms, first of all, just weren't putting grade level work in front of students, right? The first step is we have to be giving students access to those high quality instructional materials. But that when schools did put grade level work in front of students, they were able to rise to that level of rigor, and they were able to meet the demands of that content in higher proportions than maybe we might be assuming. And that if we put grade level work in front of students, they can demonstrate sort of the ability to master that. And that is how we close the opportunity gap. And so I hear you that students may fall behind, and that we might be facing a divide where 80% of our students have significant unfinished learning that we need to address. And there are a few ways that we can talk about doing that. One will be choosing essential prerequisite skills, content knowledge, vocabulary to include, to accelerate their learning. And another, in terms of reading, may be sort of foundational skills intervention that students need. If students are still needing support with decoding, with those foundational skills standards, that does need to be provided separately from maybe that grade level content course. And so that I do want to name. Yeah, but I do think this opportunity myth means that we have to make the effort of putting that grade level work in front of students. Shireen, I know you're an ELA person, probably
Yes.
raring to
I've been
jump
sitting
in.
here thinking, what's the analogy? When I think of when I would teach Shakespeare, any Shakespearean work, any high school teacher who has done this has run up against this idea of the language that is used. You don't want to spend all of your time, you know, diving into how they would write and speak. And so you identify the really critical things where they can start to recognize that this is anger, this is joy, this is confusion, whatever it is, right? So that's, I think that is one way to possibly approach it. The other thing that came up in one of the groups that I was in was the idea that English really is so circular, right? Like we come back to main idea, we come back to theme. Those kinds of things happen first grade through college. And so there are very real skills that get sort of addressed in different ways. So like I know in my, you know, I hear the 80-20, that's a really good sort of framing. It's also this idea of the 80% that what is the 80%, what are you looking for 80% of your like content, let's say, and what are the 20% of things that the kids don't have to get them there? And I think that feels a little bit less intimidating because English teachers for sure have done this the entire time they've been teaching. They've always sort of had to identify what those gaps are. So I won't just say English, I know math does too, but I'm gonna speak from my experience.
Can I just share that in my breakout room, we had a couple interesting conversations. I'm Marissa Pazant, the English Language Arts Specialist for the Nebraska Department of Ed. And I also wanted to provide a little reassurance as a backup to this comment, but we were just talking about how there was some fear that teachers might, you know, default to lightening up the work, sort of paring it down, making it easier with these assumptions. And we were just talking about, it kind of occurs to us that part of this work is kind of like adaptive work and making sure that we're addressing mindsets as much as we're addressing the essential content, and making sure that we are challenging ourselves to believe that our students can still successfully complete grade level work. We had all kinds of interesting conversations, like, you know, using complex text as kind of a diagnostic almost, and, you know, grounding your need for intervention in, you know, what your students are showing you with grade level work. And then the last part of our conversation, the English Language Arts standards are under revision. We'll be presenting a first draft to the board next month, and there might be a little anxiety, oh, we've got to incorporate these new revised standards, but I just want to reassure everybody, next year is not the year for that. It's just the exploration stage where we're kind of learning about the revised standards. You know, they don't even go to the board for approval until September after the school year started. So if I hear that concern, I'm going to assume it's out there more broadly as a concern. So if anybody's thinking about the revised ELA standards, next year is really just about exploration, familiarization, you know, making your plans for alignment. And then math follows up after that. So math comes up for revision the following year.
I was in a group where someone also shared, I don't know if she's still on here, Courtney, but you don't have to come off mute, Courtney, if you don't want to. But she was sharing that she hasn't seen the behind the scenes work that's been done in terms of the scopes and sequences and how they have seemed to adapt for this window and have been really responsive to what the needs are. And so it was great to hear from her perspective that she didn't, she didn't see the behind the scenes picture, but she's in the front lines teaching in class and she's seen the impact of that work. So that's great. And thank you, Marissa, for sharing this.
Great.
I would just add to that, I would just echo everything everyone said, including the legitimate questions and thought around how do we make all of this happen for kids as well, and the difficulty around it. And in particular, TNTP has begun work to take an all means all approach, not just for students with learning disabilities or students who are behind, but for all students as well. And to move away from just focusing on tier 1 for some kids. So it's sort of connected there, just to say that the challenge is real. I think when we think about learning acceleration in particular, just some of the larger themes to pull out. One is to say that putting grade level work and high expectations in front of students can accelerate learning, but you can't forget what we call the just-in-time supports, which are vitally important, whether that's through pre-reading, do nows, lesson here or there around prerequisite skills and knowledge, which we'll dive into, in order to support students to get up to grade level standards, especially when there's unfinished learning. So those just-in-time supports are essential and are necessary. I think the other thing when you think about next year, and when we talk about learning acceleration, we don't just talk about learning acceleration of how do we catch kids up from unfinished learning this summer or next fall, but really how do you take a 2-year approach as a district or a state or school, knowing that it's going to take longer than a couple of months to close the gaps in unfinished learning that we've seen this past year. And so, but part of that is ensuring that because we know when we diagnose students and because we know there's unfinished learning, is particularly at the start of next school year, if you're a 4th grade teacher, for example, not staying stuck in teaching 3rd grade standards for half the year, where kids aren't getting grade appropriate assignments for 6 months based on a thought that they can't potentially do it or that we can't support them to get there. So when you take a year-long approach and thinking about how do we get grade level content in front of kids from day 1 and as quickly as possible with those supports, that's another theme I just want to pull out from our learning acceleration concept.
Thanks, Chris. We will keep this topic sort of top of mind as we continue today. And now what I really want us to do is jump in to the next portion of this document, which is pages 10 through 14. And this is the framing for the English language arts K through 12 essential instructional content. There are some key pieces here that give us the rationale for this approach to English language arts. So again, we're going to read 4 pages and take notes and come back together to discuss and share out any questions that we have to sort of ground our work here. So annotate on your computer, annotate on a hard copy if you have one available, and be thinking sort of what resonates with you and what questions do you still have. This is a little bit meatier, so I'll give you 7 minutes of reading here. All right, I think most folks are joining back. Great discussions in the breakout rooms that I jumped in.
Yeah.
And so now we've sort of grounded ourselves in these introduction parts of the document. And we're going to continue to jump in to our goal today, our deceptively simple goal of identifying the essential content for each grade level and identifying the prerequisite knowledge and skills, academic vocabulary that students may need at that grade level. So just from doing this reading, it's already feeling a little bit more complicated. And so if you're a curriculum leader, like some on the call, you'll want to spend the majority of your time here, right? This work is going to be exactly aligned with the kind of work you're doing. For others on this call with different roles, we're going to go through this process so you can see what it looks like. You can grapple with these questions that the curriculum team teachers are being asked to grapple with, so that you can take this back to your team and better support them throughout. So engage in this from whatever level or lens you're looking at. This is from our first session where we talked about this Racy model. So in terms of this part, you may be the curriculum manager who's responsible for this work. You might be their manager who's accountable to make sure, holding them accountable to get this done. You might be a member of the team that needs to be consulted or informed about this work. So this isn't going to be everyone's primary responsibility. Only a small subset of us will actually engage in this work after the session. But all of us have a role to play here, whether we're holding others accountable, we're being consulted, or we're part of the team that needs the information so we can best support. So we're going to take the tools that we have and begin to identify our essential knowledge and skills in fourth grade literacy. We're going to start by looking at an anchor text and including the qualitative analysis to identify the knowledge students might need to build. And then we're going to consider our sort of instructional guide for fourth grade, the document that we've just been reading. We'll go to the fourth grade section in particular, and that will help us narrow our focus in terms of content, knowledge, skills, and prerequisite skills that students will need in order to build. In your handout, there were 3 links in this ELA section. I jumped to link 3, sorry about the order, for the essential instructional content guides. The other links there are around text complexity and qualitative analysis. I'm going to walk through that process here. It's already done. But if that's something you're interested in, there's links to student achievement partners that have a lot of resources about how to do qualitative analysis. If you are using a tier 1 curriculum, high quality instructional material, this is likely done for you, the qualitative analysis, the text complexity work, and your team will just be reading that, gaining information from it. If you have yet to adopt a tier 1 curriculum, you'll want to do that text complexity analysis, the qualitative analysis for every text, so that you ensure you're putting grade level materials in front of students. So our text for this example is going to be Esperanza Rising. Throw in the chat anything you know about Esperanza Rising. Have you read it? Do you know anything about it? We talked about it 2 weeks ago in our first session. Maybe you have a recollection there. Put in the chat anything you know, or based on looking at the cover here, sort of what your predictions are about this text. All right, Julie read it and taught it, so she's going to be one of our experts on the call. Everyone's going to want to be in Julie's breakout room.
She definitely also made it clear it was many, many years ago.
for that part because it was many, many years ago.
I'm the same. There's some books where I'm like, I know I taught that at some point.
What else do you know about Esperanza Rising? What familiarity do you have with it? Or what can you ascertain from looking at the image or our conversation last Thursday? You can see some people doing a quick Google. That's fine too if you need to. Esperanza goes through a great change. Great. Matt's getting at some of those central themes. Hope.
I see you picking up on her name, Matt. I got you.
Okay, great. Getting some good conversation in the chat there. So Esperanza Rising is an ELA text, and this is a high quality instructional material curriculum, and they've done this text complexity piece for us. So they give us a text description. It's the story of a privileged girl who is forced to leave the family ranch in Mexico after the tragic death of her father. Esperanza and her mother have no choice but to move to a camp for Mexican farm workers in California during the Great Depression. Esperanza is unprepared for the financial difficulties, hard labor, and discrimination her family faces. The novel traces Esperanza's journey as she struggles to start over in the face of incredible adversity. Lots in this text description. And then we have the quantitative measures here. The quantitative measure of the text is the Lexile level here, in this case, 750. And if we were just looking at the quantitative measure, that would put this in the second and third grade band. But then we also have our qualitative analysis. This is 4 sections we want to look at for every text: meaning and purpose, text structure, language features, and knowledge demands. So I'm going to give you a second now to read on your own about the qualitative measures for Esperanza Rising. You'll want to pull out information here to help you understand the key prerequisite skills and knowledge we may need to build. So look here for some of those key focuses. All right, now that you've had a chance to read here, what are you noticing now about Esperanza Rising? What are going to be some of the key knowledge that students are going to need, the key skills and vocabulary that you see students may need? You can take notes on your own, and you can chat those notes as well. What are you noticing here based on the on the qualitative measures. And then if you're using a high quality curriculum, it'll sort of help you understand the considerations for the reader and the task at hand and placement. So this book, although the Lexile is a 2nd to 3rd grade Lexile level, falls in the 4-5 band because of the themes, the historical and cultural knowledge, and the use of metaphor throughout. So that qualitative measure really bumps this up to a 4th and 5th grade level text. So once we've identified our book, this Esperanza Rising is the main book in 4th grade in a unit of the curriculum. We want to then go back to our instructional guide that we were just in and dive into 4th grade specific standard skills and content knowledge. And if we go back to the essential content guide, and we will in a minute, and we'll look at 4th grade there, we will see the work that Nebraska has already done to identify the essential content and the essential focuses in 4th grade. One of the main focuses here is around systematic work with text-based vocabulary and syntax. So including some of our work around vocabulary within our grade level texts. This gives us considerations for our instructional content and our practices in the essential content guide. It also connects it for us here to Nebraska state standards as well as Common Core standards. And in order to think, how can I identify here what's going to be a prerequisite skill that students might need? We can also look at our state standards. And you have this beautiful horizontal or vertical view. You have both views that are really helpful. And in this case, I just zoomed in on one connection that I noticed. If you look here at the difference between sort of 3rd grade and 4th grade, around a vocabulary skill, you'll see that in 4th grade, students are using context clues that you might find in a word, phrase, sentence, and paragraph, and text features to determine the meanings of unknown words. And the difference, the jump they're making from 3rd grade, is that in 3rd grade, they were just using word, phrases, and sentence clues. So now in 4th grade, in Esperanza Rising, we need to be expecting them to look inside of a paragraph, inside of a larger bank of text, to make these connections and to determine meaning of unfamiliar words. In order to provide supports, we might go back and focus on within sentences to start building that skill, building that ability within Esperanza Rising. So the 4th grade level work here, we know we need to be doing because we want to put 4th grade level work in front of our students. But there could be some just-in-time supports that we can build in around this standard throughout. So I did one example here. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I'm going to allow you guys to dive in to identifying the prerequisite skills, content knowledge and academic vocabulary you may need for Esperanza Rising, or working with your group to determine how this, how you can take this back to give this PD, to support your team in implementing this. So we'll have some work time and some discussion time. We will do that by district. That was helpful last week. So after the break, we'll have some work time where you can join a group with people you choose. And then after that, we will be switching to math. I got some chats about that. There is math. We are doing 4th grade ELA first, and then we'll jump into 4th grade math. So if you came specifically looking for the math, I think dive in full force to the ELA content so that you understand the demands, the rigor needed in English language arts as well. And then we will switch over to math, and I'd ask the English language arts team to dive in to the math work as well.
And just quickly, if you're not in Omaha Public Schools and there's a different district or group that you would like, ESU or whatever, if you could just chat me what room you want open for you, I will offer that for you.
Awesome. So Shireen will set up some of those groups for after break. We're going to take a 14-minute break because this is going to be a long session. So come back at 5:10. 5:10 is our time to return. Chat before that if there is a group name that you'd like her to make in a breakout room. And we will see you at 5:10. I'm going to set my alarm now.
How are you feeling? Oh no.
I'm back. I need to go to the OPS room. I tried to update, and you can't do that while you're in a meeting. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. I popped into 2 of the rooms. And look, the point of this time was, you know, if your group wanted to go through the Esperanza Rising, great. If not, use this time to discuss sort of where the pieces fit in the puzzle. And I heard some good discussion in both groups. In Omaha, I understand that y'all adopted materials and then didn't get the chance to actually roll them out. And so there's a real tension there between being able to support teachers in what they need to do next without really having had the opportunity to really work with them on that. So I heard that. And then in the secondary math group, I know Deb was hoping to get some candid feedback on all things math and secondary math. So that's what I heard, which I thought was great. What are some takeaways that you guys may have, or anything you want to add to what you might have taken away from those discussions with your colleagues? You can just come off mute. Courtney, Matt, Melissa.
I think our group was really just focusing, especially there kind of at the end with like the discrepancies, even with like our students who are so far maybe below grade level, and kind of how we like fairly assess them as well. That's I think where we were headed in our discussion, and we got kicked out. But we were kind of, oh no, it's okay. We just are chatty. But I think, yeah, we were kind of starting to head in the direction of like with our students, when we have such a wide gap in like learning abilities in our classroom, even how we like fairly assess them when we have one student who's at a 3rd grade level and one who's at a 9th grade level. I mean, on, 9th grade is their content grade. So just, yeah, I think that's kind of where we were headed.
Yeah, and I appreciated about the document was that it sort of identified formative assessments as a real space like to be grounded in, so that it didn't feel, or so that it wasn't, the word gatekeeper, resonated with me, like that testing didn't feel like it was excluding more kids than it was including in that. So yeah, we will have more time to chat, I promise. Does anybody else want to share any other sort of takeaways for them, or? That's all right. All right, I'm kicking it back to you, Elizabeth.
Great. Okay. We are gonna just wrap up our final thoughts. There is a spot for you to write next steps. If you want to quickly jot down something your group mentioned, you don't want to forget if you got cut off in the middle of a thought, jot that down in the handout or whatever organizational tool works for you. And just remember the links that are in the document in terms of text complexity if you need to do that work alone, or in terms of the Nebraska resources. And then we're switching over to doing this work in math. How do we approach accelerated learning and essential instructional content knowledge in mathematics? So I know that math team is excited. They're ready to switch over, and we'll dive in there. I want you to take just like a 30-second stretch break, move your arms, stand up if you need to. I know my watch always tells me to stand when I've been seated for too long. So take 30 seconds, do what you need to get your body ready. And we'll jump into math. Here we'll focus on identifying the essential instructional content first. And we know we have our 2 goals, deceptively simple goals that will take us a while to dive into: the critical content for each grade level, and then the prerequisite knowledge and skills. In math, there's 3 main focuses, structures that we want to address. This isn't a training on these, but it is something to keep in mind as we continue our work. And these are the 3 big shifts we want to make around focus, coherence, and rigor. Take a second and read those 3 shifts. And these shifts are going to be key to the work we do today. focus is around narrowing the work of the grade level to those major clusters to really focus most of our attention on the essential math content. And that's even more important this year and next year as we're accelerating learning to address unfinished learning. Coherence will help us see how things are connected. We'll have a great tool to look at the coherence and the connection from grade level to grade level. And then also sort of balancing here sort of our conceptual understanding with our fluency and procedural skills in our rigor category. We'll be using sort of 3 tools today. The first is around focus, and this is around a great resource, Achieve the Core Made. This is Common Core aligned, but there's ways you can look at it from the lens of Nebraska standards that allows us to see those major clusters represented here with a green box, supporting clusters, standards that are going to support the major work of the grade level, and additional clusters with a yellow circle, which we may not spend as much time on. So in terms of dividing curriculum time up and instructional time up, we will focus the majority of our time on those essential standards, which are the major content standards of the grade. So this resource exists for every grade level, and it's a 1-pager that just allows you to take a view of the grade level. Here we're looking at 4th grade because that's the example we'll be diving into. Someone come off mute and shout out for me, what's the major work of 4th grade? Give me 2 to 3 standards that are major work here.
Understanding of fraction equivalence and ordering fractions.
Great. 2 more.
Multi-digit whole number operations.
One more major work.
I would say comparing, let's see, I lost it now. Comparing fractions and decimals. And we also have percents in Nebraska.
Great, great. The next tool we're going to use will focus on our shift of coherence. This is also from Achievement Partners. It's the Coherence Map. This is really helpful in terms of looking for those prerequisite skills because they've done the work of aligning and making connections between standards, both within a grade level and both grade level before and grade level above, so that you're able to see the connections and the places where you can provide extension and the places where you might need to get those prerequisite skills and content knowledge. And lastly, the other tool that we'll be using is the same link as the ELA tool, but now we'll click on the second link, which is Essential Instructional Content for Mathematics. This is the Nebraska specific tool that will help us sort of identify the essential content in math. So I'll put that link back in the chat because it was difficult last time. But if you go to the 3rd page of the handout, you'll also find the link there. Oops. And once you're at the mathematics document, so we're switching over. There's the link, took me a second. You're going to turn to the introduction of this portion. some of the language in the introduction may sound similar, but there are some math specific pieces in the introduction that I want you to focus on. The introduction up here is on pages 5 through 8. I'm going to give you 5 minutes here. I want you to be thinking about the purpose of the document and any questions you have about the information provided. So it should be a shorter time in order to share out, and you're looking for math specific focuses. All right. For the sake of time, those intros are key. Make sure you're really grounding yourself there. But I want to move on to the meat of this section, which is reading pages 9 through 13. So skim that intro so we can dive in. I want you to look at this to outline the approach in mathematics. And I especially want you to zoom in on the productive beliefs about children's mathematical ability. So be looking out for the productive beliefs about children's mathematical ability. And we'll come back to talk about those in a breakout room or just whole group at this point. So dive into pages 9 through 13 and be thinking about those productive beliefs about children's mathematical ability as we go.
Another 30 seconds. So
I'm coming back, Shireen. Okay, so we'll share where we are now. So you've had some time to read. And Shireen's going to highlight sort of these productive beliefs around children. Take it away, Shireen.
okay, so I don't know about you guys, but the chunk that was excerpted in the middle that talked about curricular junk food was particularly touching to me, because I sometimes do feel like that we are trying to cover more, and depth, not breadth, is the way to go. Does that resonate with y'all? Do you feel that as math people? Since I think we largely have math people still joining us. So these are just 3 sort of high level, big, super duper important things that that the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics sort of stated very clearly, that the math instruction should account for and leverage the differences to promote rich and connected math learning experiences. That all children should have access to the grade level mathematics content, and center it on understanding with building from what they know and the prior knowledge. And this is like the right hand to the left hand of English. This is what English teachers do. This is what math teachers do. It's sort of hardwired, but I think it's a little bit more tempting in math to peel back all the way down to, okay, this is where they are. I like to use the example here of physics. There are communities that have physics first as their curriculum, and the argument, I remember overhearing it in a teacher's lounge. The argument was, well, they don't have the math skills yet. And the way that the physics curriculum worked, it introduced the application of the math skills. And so the kids, and that was a school that I helped found, those kids ended up having a more sound understanding of both physics and math as a result of how the concepts were introduced. So interventions must focus on the content that is connected with and promotes the grade level curriculum through this problem solving and reasoning, and not be just kill and drill. And I think we know that. And I heard, in the discussion in the math group, like there's a high level of concern on making sure that this is coming to life for kids. So, and a high level of interest. So I think we're going back. Are we doing this whole group? Let's see. Maybe we do this whole group. How do you guys feel?
Yeah, I think we're good whole group. Just
don't leave me hanging, folks. I heard great things in math. Matt, I'm gonna call on you. What do you think about what you read? What questions do you have?
I mean, I was looking at those productive beliefs, and that interventions, how it says interventions must focus on content that is connected with and promotes grade level. That's true, but how do we get the stuff that they missed without going to those lower level basic skills? How do we teach our 8th, 7th, and 8th graders who can't multiply to multiply with interventions without going to those lower level skills also?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to open that up to other math folks first, but I have a quick idea that comes to mind. So other math folks, what ideas do you have? I mean, I imagine that resonates, right? Like very heavy head nods. So we have, I'm gonna leave it open. Deanna, Stephanie.
One thing that Deanna and I talked about, so I'm saying she has to speak into this also, is that we talk about the just-in-time interventions and that it happens as we're teaching the material that's on grade level. What do they really need to learn that material? We don't pre-teach it all. Some of our instincts are to, oh, they didn't learn this in 6th grade, so I better hurry up and teach it at the beginning of 7th grade. But instead we look, and I think, Matt, that's somewhat what we've been doing and what you have been doing too. It's time for us to use some multiplication. Okay, here's a mini lesson for those that don't. And then we move on and make sure that it's applied, because when it's applied, of course, they seem to be able to grasp onto it easier. And one of our big phrases that we've been hearing quite a bit is that just-in-time intervention. And that's what MOAC did too. Kanold and group talk about that. So that's what we're sort of hanging our hats on.
And Matt, a few examples of that I would give are like, you're talking about 7th and 8th grade. So it's finding the places where you do need to pull from 5th grade or 4th grade level standards to provide those just-in-time supports. So I think you do like scientific notation and operations with scientific notation in 8th grade. You might need to pull some work on like powers of 10 and some different skills from the 5th grade to provide a just-in-time support as you're starting that unit or as you're getting to that topic or module. Similarly, if you're doing linear equations, right, you're going to be looking back to find the one-step equations that they're working on in 6th grade to prepare for those multi-step equations in 8th grade. So there's ways that you're looking across, and that's the idea of coherence that I think we'll hit on. So we're not saying you can't provide those supports, but it's within the context of the grade level material and within the goal of getting them to that 8th grade level standard.
I also think of, I missed the first week of trig when I was in high school. I just missed the entire first week, and they were going over the unit circle. And then I didn't understand what was going on. And so in a lot of ways, that teacher like identified I was not connecting the dots to, and she didn't know that I wasn't there. It was a very big school. And so when I understood that this was all tied to the unit circle, my, like every cylinder was able to fire. Like I had done so poorly for that first full unit because I didn't know it. And it's not necessarily the equivalent here because, you know, I mean, I maybe should have known that I wasn't there for a week, but that's different, right? Because now you're going to have kids who are going to be coming up this year, next year, you're going to have kids who are going to have very different lost learning from the past that you're going to have to scoop up. And so I think it's more challenging, but I think in some ways it might actually mean that identifying the just-in-time supports, it's the diagnoses that were in our last session will help you figure out what that standard is that might, you know, either not be strong or not there at all. Does that maybe help? Anybody else want to share thoughts about? You guys are going to learn my whole history of math at some point, but my apologies.
Well, to go in a different direction, as those were early childhood components, but I connected with this idea. They didn't use the terminology, but it's the idea of purposeful play. I think they call them informal experiences. Mm-hmm. And if our students, especially are of lower socioeconomic status, don't have the same experiences of going to the zoo or of counting their own money and having a bank account, that those informal experiences play such a foundational role. And how do we help infuse that so that math does get connected and doesn't live in a silo? So I'm really stoked that this summer we're going to offer STEM enrichment for all of our kids that want to attend summer school, because I think you have to have those experiences to refer back to. Otherwise, math is just this obscure entity that doesn't attach itself.
Oh, that's spot on. Thank you for sharing that. And that's very exciting that you guys are offering that. Very cool.
It also connects back to our ELA work on like content knowledge. We talk a lot about in ELA, they're going to need the content knowledge about the Great Depression or about Mexican immigration. And you're talking about content knowledge you might find in mathematics, like having a bank account, making withdrawals. Like these are content knowledge pieces that we may need to provide supports for if students don't have them, or think of creative opportunities to make sure all of our students have that content knowledge. So I think I saw a connection back to our ELA half around content knowledge and developing that piece. Okay, let's, great discussion, but let's keep moving. So I think in the guide, you'll see sort of essential content that you want to focus on. And you'll see that's listed as essential content. And if you go to slides in your guide, pages 37 through 42, I believe, is where we're going to zoom in for 4th grade. This is sort of the essential instructional content for 4th grade. And it's been broken off into essential content and remaining content. And so we want to be thinking about the content that is both essential and remaining for each grade level. And this work is already done in the guide, and it allows you to provide a focus time on those essential content pieces. This work aligns to the Common Core standards, but also has the Nebraska standards in the left-hand side of the document. And in the middle, it gives you the considerations or things to focus on. What we want to do is know sort of which content are we focused on this year or in our next unit? What content do we need to edit? And are there things that we're going to eliminate? Now, I know that we're not eliminating a lot, but there could be lessons that get eliminated within a unit and get combined with something else so that we're still covering content or addressing it, but in a much smaller way to put our focus on the essential content that Nebraska has aligned. So we don't want to be eliminating entire components, but we do want to be thinking about lessons that we could cut or portions that we might combine in our curriculum to edit that content. And a lot of this work around what's essential and remaining is done for you. The standards are listed here. And so you're going to want to do some work just to sort of highlight and make sure you understand which content is essential and which content is needing to be edited or combined or addressed in a different way. We're going to look at these pages and sort of do this work. Whether you have your math curriculum, I know there was a group of math folks ready for this. If you have your math curriculum up and you know your next unit, you can start looking at what is the essential content in this unit and what's the remaining content that I may need to edit.
I have a question for you.
Yep.
We've already done this for this year. We've aligned all of the content from last year that was unfinished with this year so that they can make sure that as they teach the new grade level content, that they're building in what they need. Are you suggesting the same exact thing for next year as well?
I think from TNT's perspective, this could be a 2-year plan, although you might not want to do as much editing in terms of Nebraska. You might want to make sure you're teaching a little bit more deeply the breadth of the standards, but there's going to be some just-in-time supports that need to be provided. So that essential content will be needed. If you feel like the math group has already done this for this next unit and you feel prepared, we can look a little bit further at some of the prerequisite skills and knowledge too. So I hear that from one person. Do other people feel like they're clear in the document where to find this and they're clear on this information? Okay, cool. So let's go to the second part, which is identifying the prerequisite skills and academic vocabulary that students might need across grade levels. And I think this is getting at Matt's question, which may be the crux of the PD. So if we look in the Nebraska Essential Content document, we will find that these 3 standards would be color-coded green. They are listed as essential. They are part of 4th grade that needs to be essential. You can see that right in the document. And in your curriculum, you want to make sure these are a focus. This aligns sort of loosely to a Common Core standard here, which allows us, when we look at the Common Core standard, to use the Coherence Map, which is what I want us to pull up now. So I'm going to pull it up on my screen so I can model how we might use the Coherence Map here. And then you can have a shot doing this process. We'll give you some work time to get into it. So I'm going to change my screen over to the Coherence Map. And I'll put the link in the chat so that you can follow along, although you probably want to be able to see my screen. So maybe don't click on it yet. So in the Coherence Map, you can pick any grade level you want. We're going to do 4th grade because that's our model. And we have sort of these three standards for Nebraska that we know are essential, that we need to focus the majority of our time on, that align to 4OA-A3. So we're going to go there. We're going to pick that standard and press Map Standard. And what this does is map for us the grade level standards that support this work, the future standards that this will connect to. So why is this standard key in 7th grade, in 5th grade, throughout the math connections? And then in terms of prerequisite skills and content knowledge you may need to build, it'll also link the standards from grade levels before that you may need to focus on. We know this is a major standard in Nebraska and in Common Core. We can get more information about what type of tasks students might be asked to do here. We can find information about what this standard level of rigor is here. And then we can look, how else can we support this standard? We see there's a 4th grade supporting cluster standard that aligns to our priority standard. So this is something that we can click on and see, although we might not be focusing on this standard, there is a benefit to including that in our curriculum map and in our plan for the year, because we know that that's going to be critical understanding for students as they address our core content and the major work of the grade level. We can also see that it connects to major work in 3rd grade. And so to Matt's point, if we do need to provide just-in-time supports, the Coherence Map gives us the location of those standards and skills that we may need to support with. We can also see at the 3rd grade level that we don't need to teach a whole unit. There are some supporting cluster standards here that we probably won't pull from. So 3MDB3 is a supporting cluster standard. That's probably not going to be as useful for us in terms of support as 3OAD8, because this standard aligns with the major work that we need to be providing a just-in-time support for. So this tool allows us to take what we know are key essential content in Nebraska and quickly find those prerequisite skills and standards that we want to support with. Questions people have here about the coherence map?
A question coming up in the chat is around it being Common Core and just the, you know, and I would just reiterate, it is Common Core. I'm in Texas, and Texas is not Common Core aligned either. And so, but I know many of the math teachers here sort of use this for when it makes sense for the standards specifically that line up in similar ways. And I know that, I think it was Deb who did the crosswalk between Nebraska and Common Core. And so you've got that sort of at your fingertips too. That helps.
Yeah, and when we look in the essential content guide, it actually aligns which Nebraska standards align with a Common Core standard so that this work becomes easier for you across the work. So there are 3 Nebraska standards that are going to align here that we know are major work in the Nebraska essential content. We can also look at the standards in Nebraska and see the sort of the vertical alignment from grade level to grade level. So you can find those just-in-time supports and the prerequisite knowledge and skills. But this helps you see it even if it's not in the same sort of domain, not in algebraic thinking. You might need to be going to measurement. You might be looking somewhere else for a prerequisite skill to provide that just-in-time support. And if you do have a student that's significantly behind, that has more unfinished learning, you can go then to 3rd grade and you can see sort of what would have been the support for that standard as well. So you can continue the work to look at the 2nd grade level and the 2nd grade tasks that are going to prepare students for that 4th grade level skill. So depending on where your students are, you can determine how much support or how little support are needed. Other questions, you can put them in the chat. Shireen will jump in. I can't see the chat at the moment because I'm sharing this, but other questions folks have here. Okay, I want to clarify how I found the connection between the state standards. I might not have made that clear. So I'll share. So in the Nebraska Essential Content document, it listed 3 standards. I went and looked for what those standards were exactly, so that I knew what we were working with around products, quotients, real world problems. It's giving me all of the sort of details here of what I'm trying to solve. And it also told me what that might be connected to in terms of Common Core standards, so that I can use other tools like the Coherence Map to better inform my prerequisite skills and supports. So that is sort of the crosswalk connection that Nebraska has already done for you in a really meaningful way, so that you can use those tools to support your Nebraska standards. And once you have that standard, then you can say things like, you know, I'm going to combine the measurement lessons for these 2 standards. I'm going to focus that content so that I can give this more time and more attention in my scope and sequence. And that's the work that I heard that you've already done. And so now it just might be finding those supports that you need through tools like the Coherence Map. Thumbs up, have you used the Coherence Map? Thumbs up if you've used it before. Great. 1 thumb up, 1 thumb down. So sort of a mixed group, 2 thumbs down. So a mixed group there. Okay, so I'm going to put that in the chat. And what I want you to do is I want you to pick an essential standard in 4th grade math, or you can choose another grade, honestly, in Nebraska. What's an essential piece of content based on the essential guide that you'll need to focus on? Look in the essential guide to determine what Common Core standard that aligns with. And then practice going through those steps on the coherence map so you can see the connections both within the grade level work and for previous grade level work. We can stay on, but I want you can, minimize this screen so you can make the coherence map big on your own computer. And I'm going to give you 6 minutes to go through another standard, pick another essential standard for 4th grade or any grade, so you can practice that work on your own. All right, heard some great discussions. Want to come back together so we can wrap it up. Let's hear from 2 folks. Either how can you use this process and coherence map in your work, or what questions do you still have, and where could you use support from the group? Great discussions in our small groups. Let's just hear out in the big group. Let's hear from 2 folks.
We were talking in our group about how incredibly powerful this document is, or this coherence map, and how it could really help teachers work with individual students. But unfortunately, the fact that it's not in our Nebraska standard language, it really has a great impact on the ease of the work. And so we were just kind of talking about how can we make this usable for our Nebraska teachers. I wish we had an editable copy.
Yes.
In fact, we had been working with some different educators in the state to do something similar to this, and we had already put in many, many hours, and we're not even close to the point that this document is.
Do other people have suggestions for Marnie or have used this? It sounds like the upper grades have used this with illustrative math. How have you made that connection to Nebraska?
Illustrative math, we have it's already actually done for us. It just doesn't have like the indicators or the lessons like specifically attached to it. It's a little bit more simple, but then it's all attached like underneath in a couple of different documents. So it's similar, and it only does, so for us, since we're in the middle grades, it does 6th, 7th, and 8th. It doesn't go any farther than that, because when we started it, they didn't have anything under that, and they didn't have anything over that. They started right in the middle where there was the most need that could help our high school, like readiness, college, career ready, all that kind of stuff. So they have built it down underneath, like 5th through like K through 5. They're still working on that. And then they also have a high school program now. So I'm guessing that we'll get an updated one, hopefully sometime soon. So.
I mean, the work I did to prepare for this, like not being located in Nebraska, is I used the Nebraska standards. I downloaded like the horizontal and the vertical, so I could see both sort of like the coherence across and the focus within one domain. And so I really spent some time reading, highlighting, understanding both of those documents. And then once I had that knowledge, I could make those connections to the Common Core standard, and I appreciated the essential content guide, which had already done that. And then using the coherence map from that point will give you sort of rigorous assessment items if you need help making an exit ticket, or the sub skills that you need for the 3rd grade standard to support. And it felt very aligned to me. So there is an extra step for sure. But I did that step this week, and I believe that it'll be worth it if we can get our curriculum team to do that extra step of using a resource like this.
We really liked the fact that it did have that map sample item, but particularly from the elementary point of view, when they're dealing with multiple subject areas, to get that work in bilingual standards is really tough.
And so my suggestion there, I'm just a problem solver, so I try to, is like, could a curriculum team, I don't know what that looks like for you, but is there a way that could be done at a little higher level than teachers, so that teachers are given maybe a finished product?
And that's what Marnie was saying that we were working on.
Yeah.
We just now need this to edit it into our standards.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work, a lot more than you would ever think.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have an easy solution there. Although maybe use the coherence map just to check across rigor, check yourself on the work you're doing in Nebraska to make sure your items are aligned, the rigor is there, and that you haven't prioritized something that isn't part of that major content, because you can find that major content easily on the coherence map as well.
Yeah, we had a multi-district group of about 8 people working on it for several months. Not exclusively, and we got through number.
We got through number, but we didn't have related tasks or assessment items or anything like that. So this is really incredible and is exactly what we want. It's just making it user-friendly.
Crosswalk, yeah.
You guys remind me where in the revision of standards, that's not next year, but it's the year after. Yeah.
2022.
Okay. Well, I want to say sort of thank you for your engagement. I know math folks, you stayed till the end to make sure you got the math tools. Those ELA tools are also useful, especially if you're in a dual role. Upcoming on Monday, we have adapting our scope and sequence and pacing guides. And then we jump into a session specifically for ELA, and then a session specifically for math. So you might want to choose, not to attend session 5 if that's not an area you're focusing on, or not 6. So you can make those choices there. And then everybody back together for sessions 7 and 8.
And
So
please share with your counterparts who may have been on the call earlier who were in ELA as you chat with them, if you could let them know also that there's one coming up that's specifically for ELA, that would help.
So some of the ELA people stayed.
Oh,
thank you.
I just saw the numbers go down in terms of participants, and I knew it was a big mass exodus when I said we're doing ELA and then math. The math folks stayed till the end. But I do want to respect sort of your time. If you need me, here's my email. I'll stay on and chat with anyone who has questions or follow up. But thank you so much for your attention on a Thursday night. And I'm available if you have any needs or want to help think through how to make this more relevant, Marnie. I'd love to be a thought partner there.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, my question is, you're talking about revising, scope and sequence and pacing guides. So are you talking about for summer, for next year? I mean, obviously this year we're in 4th quarter and we've been revising pacing guides every time there's a snow day. But what exactly?
Yeah, we'll leave it up to you. I know some people want to just look it up at the upcoming unit and just the pacing guide, until the end of the year. If you wanted to look at it from a summer school perspective, I think that would be something innovative and something we're all trying to think about. What are we going to do in summer school, right? And then for people that haven't done the work of identifying, either going for a high quality curriculum that has done this for them or hasn't done their scope and sequences, because there are folks in that category, they might be thinking about next year. So we'll try to present just the process and then let you guys decide where you're going to use that process.
Okay, thank you.
But I'll tell you personally, I'm thinking about it for summer school for our schools here. So this is a process that we're going through right now to make sure summer school is meaningful. So I think that's a great lens. And
Okay,
that's the current lens I'm in as well.
that's good, because we had to have pacing for fourth quarter up
Yeah.
2 weeks ago. So we're just too big. We're a big cruise ship. It's hard to turn on a dime.
Yep.
So, all righty, thank you.
Mhm.